In this segment, the emphasis is on just taking some time to stop, think things over, make sure that we have everything ready to go, and then we can move on. We can move on then to the fourth segment, which is completing the paper. So in this segment of English 128, our objectives in this module, once again, we have a variety of activities that we'll be doing, and as a result of having done those activities, then there are outcomes that students will be able to accomplish if they've met the competencies for this particular course. So one of the first things that we'll do is we're going to review the illustration format and purpose. How do we format the illustrations? And greater question is, why does that illustration need to be included in the particular document or research paper? Do we have some kind of purpose, some point that we want to get across? It should be doing more than just serving as decoration to the paper. We also need to review the documentation styles. Primarily, students are going to use the APA, which is the American Psychiatric Association, or the MLA, which is the Modern Language Association, that have particular styles and format to follow. So we'll be reviewing those and making sure that we're on track so that we can follow and meet those protocols and those standards. We'll spend a little bit of review on the E+E content organization. And this is where we provide some example or something that will serve as evidence. But then after we present that, we need to make sure that we explain it so that it's clear to the readers how it applies. Then also we're going to review the abstract, the format and the purpose of the abstract. And once again, the abstract is the first thing that appears in the paper, but it is the last thing that is written, because it gives an overview of the paper after the paper has been completed. We're also going to review the general organization and content strategies and weaknesses. And one of the things that we'll do in this one is we'll take a look at an assortment of samples of papers from previous quarters. Those papers will have a grade on them. Those papers will have my feedback and my comments. The students' names won't be included, and I will always pick an assortment of papers that we don't have the same topic that someone is doing for the course, so that that person doesn't have some kind of insight into their particular topic. And also we need to make sure that we do a thorough proofreading of the final document before we submit it. So what are some of the outcomes that we'll be doing? Well, number one is, as a result of completing this module, students should be able to evaluate and then apply source content details in a research paper. So as you find sources and you look at the content there, should be able to decide whether or not this would be credible or useful, and then be able to understand and organize how to apply that to details in a research paper. So you'll be able to evaluate relevant use of example and explanation, the E+E that we'll be reviewing. It should be able to identify and evaluate the levels of standalone illustrations, so the nature and purpose of the illustrations. And also, third, be able to utilize documentation procedures according to specific protocols. This way we can avoid plagiarism, but also we can help our readers to find and locate the sources that we use to make sure that we've used them in context and that we've applied them in a responsible way. So students will be able to differentiate between the example or the evidence in a document as well as the explanation. So how much is actual evidence that's being used, and then how much is the explanation or the interpretation that's being applied by the writer. And number three, students will be able to integrate visual and written concepts to make sure that there's this kind of coordination between the illustrations and the written content that accompany them. And then number 4, students should be able to apply the procedures of nonlinear document production as we created the dummy in the previous module, and now we're going to fill in the dummy, not necessarily working in just one section at a time, but we can do the building of this from different parts in different areas simultaneously, sort of like a kind of a multitasking. And then finally, number 5, as a result of completing this module, students will be able to produce a research paper that has analysis, that has evaluation, and also has application of the content that's coming from credible source references. Something more than just a research paper, that a report that merely just provides information that's gathered from those sources. But actually the writer, the student, would then be able to have academic ownership of the intellectual ownership of the paper, because it's more than just repeating what others have said. So how are we going to do this? What are we going to do in order to accomplish all of this? Well, if we take a look at the schedule overview in the module itself, we can see that this is segment 4, which is completing the research paper. This particular overview of this will also be here at the top, which hasn't been added yet because, of course, we're just recording it now. Then there'll be this link to the samples of graded papers to be looked at. In Module 3, we introduced the discussion on illustrating the paper, but it won't be due until sometime during the Module 4 time. So this discussion will be the opportunity to complete this will come up at this time. But once it's been completed, then we're going to have a file with the answers to these, which students will need to post that they've read this and they understand this, and this should be prior to submitting the final paper. Then there will be a format guidelines for how to format the illustration so that it fits snugly in the paper, so that it has clear captions, and so that there's a reference and connection between the written text and that particular illustration. The documentation guide also appeared in the previous module, and so this is repeated here again. There are samples for the use of the MLA and the APA that are also there, with the documentation DIY from one page and a documentation DIY from another page. So what we'll have in this module then is we'll have the answers to those DIY documentations, which students need to review and then respond, post that they've done that prior to submitting the final paper. Also, we have the abstracts sample discussion, which appeared in the previous module. It will be completed during this module. Once it's completed, then the students will be able to review the file which has the feedback on those samples. What are the strengths and weaknesses of those, which they need to review and then post prior to submitting the final paper once again. And then the grammar guide. It's good to make that final check, final overview of the paper as you proofread it. And then finally, at the end of this module, then we'll be able to submit the final paper, which will be the final activity for the course. Once again, we know that when we're doing this, that we're working with topics and approaches in the natural sciences. So this means that our focus is on fact-based information, that we can make predictions based upon those facts. So we're not taking a look at what's the ideal or what is preferred and coming up with definitions based upon that. We're not talking about the values and coming up with judgments related to those kinds of values. What we want to do is we want to be objective and we want to be consistent. So if we base our discussion on fact-based information and then we make predictions, other people using the same facts can also come up with the same kind of predictions or same kind of results as well too. And as we know, then this also includes the applied sciences such as technology, natural resources, medicine like nursing, pharmacy, business, the financial aspects of business, aviation, and things of that nature. All right, and then when we get to the end, then we can say that we have won, and we've completed the entire 90-minute game plan here can be completed, and then we can be happy and sincere, and we can go forward and be much more successful in our other academic classes as well as in the workplace in the future.